All right, here we go. Listen, before we get to our next demonstration, I'm sorry I missed the last seminar. I heard there was a discussion or a question about Chicago pizza. As a native Chicagoan, I must address this important topic. We don't all eat stuffed pizza from Giordano's every day. We don't all eat deep dish every day. Deep dish is very nice. It can be done well. Chicago-style pizza is tavern-style pizza. As Noel alluded to, there was a piece in the New York Times in the food section about a month and a half ago that Kenji Lopez alt-wrote about Chicago tavern-style pizza. That's been around for 100 years. Deep dish has only been around for about 70. So tavern-style, thin and crispy, does not exist in Southern California. My goal is next year, hopefully, someone will come through with a really good tavern-style pie in Southern California, and we'll do that at the Pizza City Fest, and maybe it'll come from this gentleman. So, and a specific recommendation, North Side Pat's, South Side Vito and Nick's, West Suburbs Kim's Uncle. So you've got North, West, and South. And then if you're interested in a deep dish, we actually split hairs in Chicago, deep dish and deep pan. I can get into that discussion after the seminar if you really want to go deep with me on that. I have deep dish favorites and deep pan favorites. Anyway, without further ado, my name is Steve Dolinsky. I'm the founder of Pizza City Fest L.A., and I'm happy you're all here. Thank you, guys. Thanks for coming. Our next panel today, yeah, please. Our next panel today talking about how to make great pan pizza at home. Now, a lot of people like to make pizza at home. Typically, you think of a round pie, and maybe you're rolling it out with a roller, or maybe you're tossing it in the air. The problem I have with that dough is that unless you've got like a little uni oven, or unless you've got a really amazing oven at home with a pizza stone or a pizza steel, I'm always nervous about launching the pizza into the oven with that pizza peel. Sometimes it sticks. I don't put enough semolina on the peel. So pan pizza is much more forgiving. And as I found when I wrote my last book, you know, it's much easier to play around with. You can par bake it, you can freeze it. It's sturdier, it holds better. I really love pan pizza, and certainly based on the lines out here for Two Doughs or for Rip, D-Town, there's a lot of interest in pan-style pizzas. So this is something you all can do at home. And joining us today is John Arena and Chris Decker from Truly Pizza. Yes, thank you guys for being here. So your roots, John, are, well, New York, of course. That's where you're from. But Metro Pizza in Las Vegas is where you kind of made your name, right?
Right. I moved to Las Vegas in 1980. Opened our first store in June of 1980, and been going at that ever since. And about 27 years ago, Chris joined me, and I haven't worked another day since. So
it's a good partner to have. Okay.
Yeah, perfect.
Tell me about your approach to this style of pizza. You make all kinds of different pizzas. The one we're seeing today at Truly, is that a Sicilian? What do you describe that?
That's an interesting question, because people get hung up on what style of pizza do you do? Is it Detroit style? Is it Chicago style? Is it Sicilian style? I think there has to be a point as a pizza maker that you go beyond that the pizza becomes an expression of who you are at that moment. And basically you have to transcend the styles, and if you want, hence the name Truly Pizza, it's not one particular style. It's where Chris and I what we've experienced, how we've grown over the years, and what we want to express and communicate to our customers as part of the place, as part of our own experience, sociological influence, and the town itself that you're making the pizza in. So I think everybody, as pizza makers, you have to go beyond that. You have to go beyond just pizza and say, what am I trying to express? What am I truly going to express to my guests?
Hence the name. Okay. So let's say I'm just an amateur at home. I like this style of pizza. How do I begin? I buy a pan from Amazon.com on some like Lloyd's, or what? Tell me about the pan.
I like Lloyd's. If you're making pan pizza, any kind of pan pizza, black steel pan is the way to go. You don't want to use a shiny metal pan that reflects heat. You'll never get the color that you want. You'll never get the depth of caramelization that you want.
Can you show Blake, the cameraman, he's over to your left, what these look like? Yeah. So this is like a 14 by 14?
This is a 12 by 12.
Okay. I know the Detroit styles are sometimes 10 by 14, but you just like this 12 by 12.
I do, because we're going to cut this into, in this case, normally we'd cut it into 4 6x6 slices.
Gotcha. Okay.
It's manageable, and it'll give us the textures that we want, the color that we want. Every part of what you do when you make a pizza, every variable that you changes the result. You got a big science experiment going on in your kitchen that you have to manage. So you take one element of it and change it slightly, and something different happens.
Is there a vast difference between the dough recipe you might find in a basic pizza recipe versus like a round pie versus a square one versus a pan?
For us, the major difference is time and temperature. And time and temperature are an ingredient of your formula. So we talk about formulas, we don't talk about recipes because it's really a science. Hydration levels, yeast percentage, salt percentage, time, and temperature. So you can get a dough ball with the same ingredients and the same proportions, but if the time is different or the temperature is different, it's evolving into something else. So it's chemically changing all the time. So that's like the nerdy science part, but it's the fun part too.
So you've got some science experiment happening here in front underneath plastic. You want to explain what happened here?
Right. So this is a dough that was made with a poolish. So most people that are pizza makers are familiar with doing a pre-ferment, which is really a manipulation of time. Right. The poolish is 24 hours of runaway fermentation. Then it's added into the dough. The dough is mixed and rises for 3 days. So we're doing.
So you could go play golf. You could take a vacation. You could go to Vegas for the weekend.
I can do that. Chris has to stay in the kitchen and watch everything.
Okay. But once you mix this, you just keep it in a bowl, or do you put it in the pan? Tell me about that process.
We put it in a tray, and we put it in the refrigerator.
Okay.
So we're not making fast food. We're slowing the process down. How many of you make pizzas at home? How many of you have a pizza recipe that says, warm up the water a little bit, put the yeast in, mix the dough, put it in a warm place, and wait until it doubles in size, and it's ready to use? That's the basic. That was the old style of making pizza at home. It's the exact opposite of what we do. We're not trying to speed the process up. We're trying to slow everything down so all of those wonderful, magical things can take place. Changes in texture, development of color, development of flavor, change in the chew. So it's more than just a formula. It's what you do with it once you've mixed it together. The dough is alive. That's the difference between a chef and a pizzaiolo. A chef deals with dead stuff. I don't want to insult the chefs, but the chefs are they're like morticians. They take dead stuff and they make it beautiful. Pizza makers bring things to life.
All right, so talk about the life of this one over here. So how long has this been the raw dough underneath here in this pan?
This was a 24-hour poolish, and then it's been in the pan in the tray for 72 hours.
Okay, and in a refrigerator or just out
in the refrigerator?
In a refrigerator. Okay, and so while that's sitting and developing, the yeast is eating the sugars. Is it creating carbon dioxide?
It's creating carbon dioxide.
Okay.
The carbon dioxide is getting trapped inside the dough, and then once the dough hits that hot oven, the carbon dioxide expands, but it expands too rapidly to get out, and that's what makes the oven spring.
But this is the important thing, is the time. So you've got to be a little patient. If you know you're going to have people coming over Saturday night, you want to start mixing this maybe Wednesday. Tuesday. Okay, Tuesday.
But the beautiful part of it is you can do this and create a par-baked shell and freeze it and use it a month later, and it will be as good or better than the day you made it.
Okay, so when you par-bake this, tell me about that. You don't need any special thing in the oven. You're just putting in a 500 or so.
You're going to put it in the pan, and you're going to give it another rise for 4 8 hours. Our Sicilian pizza, which you've had, is 16 hours in the pan. 8 hours at room temperature after it comes out of the cooler, 16 hours in the pan, and then a par-bake. And that's after 5 days of fermentation.
And you don't need to do anything to the pan. You don't add Crisco or oil?
We add Crisco.
Oh, you do add Crisco.
And Chris is going to demonstrate that, but the Crisco...
Okay. Can we have Chris do something? Because he's just watching you, and I feel like he's not really earning his keep. So can we put him to work, please?
Keep, believe me.
Okay. All right, Chris, what are you going to do?
So I'm just going to take it out.
No, this is an important, like a dough scraper, important tool, right, John?
Yes.
Like a bench scraper.
Right. How you handle that dough, the dough is alive, and just like any living thing, everything that it experiences, it remembers and becomes a reflection of what it grows up to be. It's just like a baby. You handle the baby rough and tough, like our friend Jonathan from Spaccanapoli always says, the dough is like a baby in a kibbutz.
Now this is important.
Everybody is responsible for it.
Yes, yeah, it's true. Look at how he's handling this. This is very important. He's not pressing it down hard. He's preserving, keeping some of the air intact, right? You want that so that when it bakes, it has a little bit of a lift to it. It preserves the air pockets in there. You can see it's living, right? You can see those air pockets.
Right. We never talk about flattening dough. We talk about extending dough, which is a different mindset. Extending dough is to is to be mindful of what your hands are doing to the dough and guiding it to where it would like to be. And we're always mindful of the fact that there's carbon dioxide trapped in there, and that carbon dioxide, we don't want to degas the dough. We want to move the carbon dioxide to where we would like it to be. We spent 3 to 5 days getting that carbon dioxide built up. We don't want to knock it out. So
You don't want to degas the dough, Mike.
So
okay,
we
don't
nev-
degas it.
So you talked about rolling pins before. We never let a rolling pin touch our dough.
Right.
Would you hit your child with a rolling pin?
Of course not. No. What about a docker, though? A docker, there's like got little...
Docker is for another purpose. If
Okay.
you're doing tavern style, you might do a docker because you want some of the gas to escape.
Okay.
That's not what we're trying to do. We want oven spring, which we'll show you the result of that when we talk about crust and crumb.
Chris, I love the technique. It was just the outside 2 fingers as you were kind of moving around, right?
It's super gentle.
Really
Don't wanna beat
gentle.
it up.
Yeah, when I see Robert Garvey in Chicago press, it's like he's playing the piano.
Right.
He's just
And it's
touching
actually
it with his
called-
fingertips.
It's called pianoing the
It's called
focaccia.
pianoing it?
Yes.
Oh, that's I didn't know that. Okay. All right, so he stretches out into this 12 by 12. It's got a little bit of Crisco in there, and then this will rest for another
4 hours.
4 hours.
Yeah.
Okay. In a refrigerator or outside?
Outside room temperature.
Room temperature. So this is important. If you live in Arizona versus living in Minneapolis or Toronto,
Change the
4 hour-
variable, change the
It's
result.
a total variable.
If you were at 80 degrees, it would only take 2 hours, but it would have other effects on the finished product. So we want to be between 70 and 72 if possible.
So take a reading of the ambient temperature of where you are, where this is sitting out.
Right.
Okay.
Every detail counts.
Of course it
Everything
does.
is important.
Time and temperature are the most important things. Okay, so then this is after how long?
This is after about 3.5 hours.
After 3.5 hours, okay.
So people will ask, how long does it take until it's ready?
But come on, you know because you've been eyeballing it for years, but what would you tell an amateur?
I'm looking for development of gas.
I want to show the camera over there. Go over there. On that
Some
side.
bubbling.
Yeah. Development of gas.
Lift.
Okay, that's a good thing.
Lift, and you have to find it at that sweet spot where it's reached its maximum of lift, which comes through experience, before it collapses.
It's basically halfway up the inside of the pan, it looks like.
In this case, for this particular pizza,
Okay.
yes. For our Sicilian, we might want to go over the top.
Oh, wow. Okay. And then this is going to get baked, you said, for a couple minutes at 500 or so?
Yeah, about 6, 7, 8 minutes. 500, 525.
6, 7, 8 minutes at 525. And this is what it looks like, John?
So we're looking for the development of caramelization. We don't want it to look completely even. I want dark spots and light spots. We're not making Wonder Bread. We're making artisan pizza.
No, dimpling is important too. Dimpling? What is dimpling?
After we proof for 4 hours, oil your fingertips a little bit, and you'll want to do that piano again. It's hard when I don't have oil, but that's how you'll get this beautiful thing.
The piano dimpling. Right. Okay.
Right.
Hit the bottom of the pan. Don't be scared to hit the bottom of the pan. You want to hit it.
And all of those textural bumps and lumps and differences in color and texture are going to create interest and contrast when you bite into it.
Sure.
We're not striving for every bite to be identical. We're striving for every bite to be a really wonderful surprise.
Okay. And then so then you can wrap it and freeze it, right?
Yep.
And freezing does something to it as well. Does it, the evaporation of the water, I'm not really sure.
Exactly. So you'll see if you go to our booth later on at Truly, you'll see that when you pick it up, it's deceptively light, or our Sicilian, amazingly light, right? It looks like a brick, but it feels
looks
like a
brick,
feather.
looks like a brick, eats like a feather. I learned that from John
Right.
Arena.
So we want it to be a surprise. So when we freeze it, there's evaporation of moisture. Then so even if we're going to use the finished pizza the next day, we freeze it overnight and then defrost it. We have that evaporation of moisture that gives it that final crisp, and then we put it in the oven, we caramelize it, and then we let it come out of the pan and kiss the stones for 30 to 60 seconds to get that final bite. You talked about this the other day about crust and crumb, and it's really what we're thinking about. We're thinking about how each bite has to have several things going on.
So tell me about this process. Once you've thawed it, let's say, and again, this is why it's a great type of pizza, because you can just leave them in the freezer, pull one out when you want, and a little bit of thaw, and then you're topping them with your sauce, your cheese, and then you turn your temperature up a little bit in your oven to bake?
A little bit. Because the first bake is going to be a little bit of a moisture evaporation. The second bake is going to be a finish, so we might bump it 25 degrees.
But then you take it out of the pan and finish it on your pizza stone.
Always.
Okay, it's got to kiss that stone because that's what gives you that beautiful undercarriage, sort of browned, evenly browned, right? You want to have
This is the par bake.
This is the par baked.
Yeah, we just did this.
Okay, but this is good to show this too, though.
Yeah.
That's the par bake. It shows you some of the structure. Look at that open crumb there. That's really pretty, isn't it?
All right, so when this is finished, there'll be a crust on the sides, crust on the cornicione, and that really tender, wonderful bite, that delicate bite when you chew into it. So we want several things to be going on at once in terms of contrast of textures, colors, fragrance. We have 5 senses, and with pizza you have the opportunity to affect all 5. So we're not only thinking about, of course, we think about how does the pizza taste, how does the pizza look, how does the pizza smell, how does the pizza feel when we bite into it, and how does the pizza sound? We're even conscious of that. So when we're working on the line and they're cutting a pizza, Chris will be listening to see to determine what he hears, to know whether or not the pizzas are cooked correctly.
And can you weigh in on the subject of adding raw vegetables to a pizza before you're baking it? My thought is with like mushrooms and spinach and onions, things that kick off liquid, if you put them on raw on the pizza and then bake it,
Where does the water go?
where does the water go? Into the pizza.
Not only that, you're creating steam in the oven, which is changing the effect of the pizza as well.
So to prevent that,
You either cook the vegetables or you put them on after the pizza. Raw vegetables go on a salad. Raw
Yep.
vegetables don't go on a pizza.
exactly.
If they go on a pizza, they go on after it comes out.
Yeah, I'm one of those weird people. After having done this now for several years, when I'm ordering a pizza, if there's going to be mushrooms involved, I will ask the server, are they sautéed or roasted ahead of time before they go on the pizza? And of course, they don't know that, and they have to go back and ask somebody. But that's an important thing. You want to put them on there after they've been par cooked. It's more work for the kitchen, but it certainly saves the pizza from disgrace.
Not only that, when you par cook it, what are you doing? You're concentrating those flavors. You're making it more intense.
Yep.
So that each bite is an explosion.
Yep. Okay, have we missed anything else in terms of pan pizza rules? Dough scraper, 12 by 12 pan, temperature, time.
Time is part of the equation, a big part of the equation. And you think of the pizza as being alive, and you think of how it's changing. People will come up to me sometimes and say, "Oh, your pizza's not the same as it was last month or 10 years ago. My pizza's not the same as it was 15 minutes ago." Because as we've had this conversation, that dough is changing.
Mm-hmm.
Also, we're changing as consumers,
Yeah.
right? We're all going to go out onto this floor when we leave this room and be a different person than what we were when we came in. So when people say, "Oh, I'm sure you go to landmark pizzerias in Chicago and you say, oh, the pizza's different than it was a decade ago or the last time I was here." Well, of course it is, because you're different.
Yeah.
Every time you go in, you're bringing the sum total of your experience in life into the room. Every time you take a bite, you're influenced by everything that took place in your life up to the moment of that bite. And the next time you go to that pizzeria, you'll be different as well.
Gee, do you think he thinks about pizza at all? Yeah. Is there a good primer for someone if they're just beginning and they're like, I don't know how to begin? Peter Reinhardt, Perfect Pan Pizza book, maybe?
The Pizza Bible, Tony Gemignani's
Pizza Bible, Tony Gemignani's here.
which is the true Bible of pizza.
Yeah. Okay.
Professional pizza makers read the Pizza Bible.
I mean, rather than looking at YouTube videos all day, those are good resources. Tony, Peter, probably. Anything else before we take questions?
Don't be afraid to fail. Don't be afraid to get in there every day and touch dough.
Yep.
Every time you touch dough, you become a different person. And for me, every time I touch the dough, I'm conjuring up the spirits of everybody who taught me. And that's important to be a part of that, to be connected to everybody who came before you and everybody who generously dedicated themselves to this craft. The pizza can grant them immortality. I know that sounds strange, but
You're a little bit of a pizza Yoda. No, I think that's true.
my uncles, my relatives who taught me,
Yeah.
when I touch the dough, they're alive again. Because something that they taught me is carried on. And when you touch the dough, the same thing will happen to you.
Yeah. No, and of course, no pressure working for a guy like this trying to make pizzas that meet his expectations when you think Pizza Yoda's in the back of your mind.
Life is good, man. I can't imagine a better place to be than next to John all these years, and I'm really happy to be a part of this and work side by side with him. So
And I'm
been
happy that I
amazing.
haven't had to do a day's work since Chris came on board 27
awesome.
years ago.
By the way, so Truly is in Dana Point, and that's going to open in a couple of weeks. You're training right now, so
Right.
hopefully very soon it'll open.
It's going to open when it's ready.
when it's ready.
I'm lucky to have a partner who's not pushing us
Right.
to get open until we're truly ready to be open.
And I love that you've got a little bit of Chicago taste today at your booth with some Jardinera, which is
Thank you.
awesome. All right, let's open up for questions because I'm sure you've got questions. Yes, sir, young man. I think we've got microphones for you possibly. Yeah, Sean's going to come over with a microphone for you. Just stand up.
Hello, everybody. My name is Elias, and I am 12 years old. I am a home cook, and I cook for my wonderful father right here. And I just wanted to ask you, what is the fastest, reliable way to make a pizza?
The fastest, reliable way. Now, I think someone like John is going to say fast is not good, right, necessarily. Is there a fast way besides going to a Neapolitan joint?
Do you want it to be good or do you want it to be fast?
All right, see, that's the thing. You want
The fastest
fast
way
or
to
you
make a
want
good
good?
pizza is to immerse yourself in pizza, to be totally dedicated to what you're doing, to always be growing and always be willing to try new things. There's no shortcut, but if you dedicate yourself to it, the time will fly by. I've been making pizzas for 20,287 days.
Jesus, really? How many
Thank
years
you,
is that?
Pizza Yoda.
September
Thank
7th,
you.
1967.
1967, September 7th. Wow, that's amazing.
And I'm not where I want to be yet, not by a long shot.
So, do you want to make pizzas at home, or you're just interested in like how to get a good fast pizza?
I make pizzas at home, but I am also interested how to make a good fast pizza.
Okay. I mean, yeah, I think what John is saying that fast doesn't necessarily mean a good pizza. And for someone like him and Chris and myself, we want really good pizza, and sometimes those pizzas take a little bit longer. So it's like planning ahead a little bit, making the dough a couple days before you're going to bake it. But a fast pizza would be like a Neapolitan in a wood-burning oven that bakes at 900 degrees for 90 seconds. If you've got a wood-burning oven, that's an easy thing to do at home. But it's
Sure,
tougher.
but
This is why we want to talk about like pan pizza. It's a nice home pizza to make. It's not so fast.
You know,
Does that make sense?
also, Steve, it's like, how long did it take you to make that pizza? 20,287 days.
Right. Accumulative knowledge. But thank you for your question. Anyone else? Yes, right in the middle here.
You said you haven't worked since Chris started working, but did you really ever work while you're making pizza?
Pardon me?
Did you really ever work while you were making pizza? Was it work for you?
No. Because it's something that I have to do. I'm not a pizza maker by vocation, it's by avocation.
Thank you.
I was called to make pizzas. And to
How many
And
people,
fish-
by the way, have been to Metro in Vegas? Here, anybody been to Metro? Only a couple of you. Wow. Okay. If you're next time you're in Vegas, there's a couple of them, right? But you go off the strip.
there's 5 that we operate and there's 2 licensed locations.
Yeah. But go get the
But
Sicilian
my
there.
goal
It's a
is
game
to someday
changer.
only have 1 with
Yeah,
him.
second question.
Yeah, second question is realistically, how many times do you really have to try to make dough for it to actually work? Because it is work when it turns out crappy. So,
Chris,
Our Sicilian that we developed at Metro, I mean, I worked for, I don't know, every day for probably 6 months before we finally got it where we were kind of happy with it. You know, all
and
these
then it's
different
evolving all the time as well. So you're never really finished. So how long does it take before you become proficient? It depends on whether or not you're mindful of your practice. You can do something 10,000 times and still be terrible at it. I'm a good example of that. Or you could do something like Chris does and be getting better every time. So it's really about, more than anything, it's about thinking about what you're doing and what the effects of how you handle the dough are in the end result. So it's really not just practice, but mindful practice.
For the home cook doing a pan pizza, do you recommend red flour or all-purpose?
Bread
That's
flour
a
or
great
all-purpose?
question.
Yeah.
Because it depends on what your fermentation process is. So the longer the fermentation, in my opinion, the higher the protein would have to be. So for our 5-day fermentation, we're doing a flour that is 14 or 14.5% protein, almost like a flour that you would use for bagels. If you're doing a pizza with a shorter fermentation window, you're going to use a softer flour because it's not going to hold up to that length of time. So I like to use, for a Sicilian pizza, you can use Tony Gemignani flour. This sounds like a plug for Tony Gemignani.
Yeah, it is. But that's okay. But no, you like his flour. You wouldn't recommend it if you didn't like it. Okay. Somebody else? Yes, right in front here.
But when you're developing a recipe and you hit a fork in the road with a new idea, but you're not done, you're not where you want to be with the thing you're working on, do you go off on the new tangent and explore? or do you keep focusing on what you've been working
No,
on
I think you
trying to
should
get better?
dive deep into one thing and stay with it for as long as possible until you really feel that you've coaxed everything that you can out of that method or that formula. People tend to jump around from one thing to another. They hear about oh, Polish, I want to use Polish. Oh, Biga, let's do that. It's like squirrels, tinfoil. I think you need to settle on one thing and really go at it until you felt that you've explored every nuance of that particular thing to really get the most out of it, and stick with it for a while, because we're doing basically the same formula for our Sicilian that we did 10 years ago, but there have been subtle changes, and we're still not to where we feel like we've coaxed everything that we possibly can get out of it.
Thank you.
That was a great
Another
question.
I was just wondering about, with a longer proofing time, what temperature of water do you use and what type of yeast do you use?
Temperature of the water and the type of yeast with a longer...
We use fresh yeast. Typically, we use fresh yeast, and that's just a throwback to what I grew up with. And to me, the yeast is also, it's not just yeast; it's also a flavor ingredient. So because we're doing cold fermentation, the yeast that we use is similar to it's the same yeast that you would use to make a lager beer, which is cold fermented. So some people will tell you yeast is yeast. I don't think so. I think every difference, just like if you go to a brewery, the yeast that they use for a Pilsner might not be the same yeast that they use for an IPA. So if it works for beer, it works for pizza. Fermentation is affected by every variable.
Temperature of water?
I want my dough to come out of the mixer at about 68 degrees, so I will adjust based on that, based on room temperature, temperature of the ingredients, temperature of the friction factor of the mixer, or whether you're mixing by hand.
I was
but
just
I know
gonna
that I
s-
want to adjust so that the dough comes out of the mixer at 68 to 70.
I was just going to say, a super nerdy term that I learned a couple years ago is friction factor, which is the temperature that's generated by the heat of the mixer, right? And you calculate that as well. Just super nerdy and geeky, but incredibly important to making great pizza. The friction factor. Yes, over here.
I was just wondering, what has your career, what is a surprising life lesson, or what is just something important that pizza making has taught you in your life that most people might not have thought of?
The important thing to me, I think the most important thing was that I learned that whatever you're doing can become an expression of who you are, and should be an expression of who you are. And how you do it, how you feel about it, should be evident when people take a bite of the pizza. The pizza has this amazing power to communicate what's important to you, what your values are, what your life experiences are. And if you surrender to that, the pizza can be no different than any other artist's medium. And it's really the most important thing to me is not, do I like this pizza or do I not like this pizza, or is this authentic Chicago style, or any of that nonsense. What's really is, look at each pizza and say to yourself, what is the story that this pizza is trying to tell me? To appreciate it, to not eat like sharks, just swallowing stuff and not thinking about how it got there, but to bite into the pizza and say, what does this pizza tell me about the person that made this pizza, the history of that person, the history of the community, the history of that culture. And the pizza has the ability to do that if we pay attention as consumers. And if we do that, we'll be more responsible. We'll consume more responsibly if we think about what it took to get this here to what it is. And then you don't have to have a 20-ounce latte, because a 2-ounce espresso will satisfy you just as much or more, because you've thought about how it got to that cup, or how this pizza got to your plate. So it's not about what's good or bad, it's about what is the story.
Yes.
If you take the time and labor to go through the fermentation process for the 3 to 5 days, and then you freeze it, how long does it take after it comes out of the freezer till you have a hot and ready pizza?
That depends on your formula, of course, but you can plan on 8 hours or thereabouts, and that's going to depend on what your hydration level was, what type of ingredients you used, how you handled it. But figure if you've taken that dough, let it ferment, then reball it, wrap it up and freeze it. When you defrost it again, during that time period, it will become malleable and you'll be able to able to stretch it. You want it to get to a point where when you stretch the dough out, when you handle the dough, when you extend the dough, it doesn't spring back. So many of you have made pizzas at home and you get that, you stretch out the pizza and it shrinks back. That's the pizza telling you I'm not really ready yet. Okay?
You can't be in a hurry.
What that means is that the dough still has memory. What you're looking for is that over time, just like me, as it got older, the dough starts to forget everything. It has no memory left, and it just stays wherever you put it.
Because when you see guys hand stretch dough that's 3-day ferment, like I'm thinking of Robert in Chicago, the gravity does all the work.
Exactly.
You don't have to do that much to it. It's so loose, right? So the gluten is relaxed.
Right. If you're muscling it, it wasn't really ready yet.
For Chris, I'm a huge fan of your Instagram feed, and your pizzas, not only they look delicious, but they're visually stunning as well. And so I was just sort of wondering, like, do you have a visual art background? If, like, what is it that inspires the composition of those things and certain toppings and colors? It's super inspiring for people at home making it, and I was just wondering, like, where that comes from for you, and does that scratch a different itch than making the other stuff?
Yeah. Well, first, thank you for that. The Instagram was kind of funny. I kind of did it like at the beginning, just of like a journal, like a diary of things that were going on in my head, and like just kind of keep track of it. And it kind of took off a little bit, but it's just things that inspire me. I was last 25 years, 26 years, I've been in Las Vegas, and there's so many great chefs, and they inspired me to different toppings. And in Las Vegas, there's so many different styles of food. In any market you go to, there's so many products out there. So, it's just kind of putting stuff together. And I kind of got bored making pepperoni pizza every day. And I know that's what everyone loves, and that's your bread and butter. But I was like, there's so much more in my head that I want to kind of get out, and that's just kind of how I did it. And so thank you for that. And I don't have any background in it or anything. It's just good lighting and luck, I think.
And natural lighting is important.
You mentioned that you use Crisco and not olive oil or butter or anything in between, and I'm wondering why, or what makes one better than the other.
In the old days when you did pan pizza, you would use lard, which, of course, a lot of people don't eat lard anymore. But what you're using a shortening. It's a baker's trick to get the pizza to stay where you put it, so that it's not sliding and moving around, so it can adhere to the sides. If it's sliding around too much, it won't retain gas as well. But if you put shortening in the pan and move it out, it's like glue. It stays down, and then it allows it to rise up and give you better texture.
Okay, one more question.
Totally random, but if you had to choose, what is your favorite for a pizza?
Besides cheese, or just is the cheese included?
Yeah, cheese is included or not. What is your ideal pizza, I guess?
My ideal pizza, of course, is a really great cheese pizza because there's nowhere to hide. You make a great cheese pizza, you take a bite, it tells you everything you need to know about the pizza maker's choice of ingredients and also about their technique. So as pure as you can get, that's what I look for.
I was going to say there are a couple of people here over this weekend that are just doing cheese on their menu. We asked every pizzeria, please provide one with like a protein and one without. And some are just doing cheese. And so they're really like hanging it out there. Hey, this is who I am as a pizza maker. I'm not going to cover it up with burrata and andouille and guanciale and speck and whatever. It's just cheese pizza. And I always respect that.
Right.
You see
as
that.
consumers, you have to respect it, and you have to give the pizza maker that opportunity to succeed or fail, and applaud every effort, not just the ones that are, if you want us to experiment, if you want us to grow as pizza makers, you got to be willing to put up with a couple of misfires once in a while.
Well, I would like to applaud these two gentlemen. Thank you for coming, guys. You guys were awesome. Great crowd. So a couple of things coming up. So 4 o'clock, we've got another collab lab happening right around the corner here. We've got our next discussion with the chef's table at 4, and then we're done at 5. So get in some more pizzas. Don't get in the longest line. Everybody here has been curated. They're all great pizzas. Trust me. So if you want to wait in a long line, that's fine. But there are 19 other great pizzerias here. So please get out and try some pizzas. Get all of your pizzas stamped so you can say you hit them all. And we'll see you hopefully the next seminar. Thanks, guys. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.